Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Victoria Healey and I am English Subject Lead here at AQA, working as part of the English Subject Support Team. And I'm joined today by Catherine Powell, who is Senior Product Manager for English at AQA too. Today's subject session that you're joining us for is part of a series of events designed to keep you updated with the essentials relating to assessment reform for English. We know that English teachers are really engaged with the conversations around assessment reform, and so it might be that some of the information today that we share you've already been engaged with already, but it might also be the case that you're first turning your attention to assessment reform, would like to learn more. We know how busy this academic year I'm sure has been, and you might be now looking to learn more for the year ahead. With that in mind, we've designed a session today where we're going to recap for you some of the key information coming out of the curriculum and assessment review, have a look at the timeline and the key dates and think about where we are in that. And then we're going to answer some of the frequently asked questions that are emerging from that initial engagement and discussion around the curriculum and assessment review. There will be lots of opportunity today for us to hear your feedback and your questions and your thoughts too, because we're going to be making use of the Slido so that you can take part in polls and contribute questions and ideas there too. We do probably, it's worth mentioning at this point, we have lots of people who are joining the call today. So just to be aware that if, as you're looking at the Slido, if you see a question that you would really like to be answered or it aligns with something that you'd like to know more about, please use the upvote function to raise that question to the top of the list. And if for whatever reason that question isn't addressed during the session today, we will be following up after the session with an FAQ document as well.
Lovely. Thank you, Vicky, and welcome everybody. Before we dive in, could I ask you to please join our Slido? This will give you the opportunity to give us your insights and feedback and also post your questions. If you've got your phone to hand, you can use the QR code on your screen, or you can go to slido.com hashtag AQA English, and that will bring you right in. I'll give you a moment to join before we move on. But Lucy, could you please pop the Slido URL in the chat so that it's there for anybody who needs it for reference once this slide has moved on? Thank you. So
Okay,
to have our first poll.
Yeah, move it on now.
Brilliant, thanks.
There we go.
Thanks, lovely. So for our first poll, and before we start the update, can you please let us know on a scale of 1 to 5 how much you understand about what assessment reform could mean for you? And Lucy, if we could have a little look at those answers as they come in. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, that's really interesting. So most people in the middle there, really. So some feeling a bit more confident about what assessment reform means for them, and others at the other end of the scale. So hopefully we will be able to, by the end of the session, we'll be able to kind of move people to have a clearer picture of what we know to date, and also understand what's being worked through and what it all means for you.
Yeah, brilliant. And just to place this session in context, it's part of a series of sessions that's taking place over the week. And this is all part of our assessment reform week. And the hope is that by the completion of this week, you will really have a good understanding of everything you need to know about assessment reform, and particularly thinking about what those proposed changes could mean for learners in your setting, your subject, and your school more broadly too. Just in case you've missed any of the events, or just to recap if you have participated in any of them so far, you'll know that on Monday there was a kick-off webinar that took place, and that was taking that kind of top-level view, looking at reform more generally and what it means for you. Yesterday then, that was followed by a video podcast thinking about what reform means for schools, and that was a real conversation with school leaders on what really matters now in school. And today we have our subject webinar with a really focus on subject updates for English, and we hope to be able to help to answer some of the key questions emerging regarding assessment reform and what this might mean for you now and in the coming years ahead. We've still got more to come beyond that in the rest of the week as well. Tomorrow is all about how we can support you to look at all the support available. And then on Friday, we'll be at the Festival of Education, focusing on getting teachers involved in assessment reform with live teacher panels as well. So before we begin today, we thought it might be helpful to just kind of take a step back and revisit and recap some of the kind of key headlines and information relating to assessment reform and where we are at the moment. And oh, have I stopped sharing? I'm sorry, I'm just going to reshare because I'm just aware that this might have dropped off. Is that all okay now, Catherine?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry about that. So I just want to take a second to look at the visual on screen, and that just kind of is a really handy infographic about where we're at and the key dates that are coming up to. So we're in, obviously at the moment, we're in 2026 looking at a process of consultation around the national curriculum, with publication of the new national curriculum expected in 2027, ready for first teaching in 2028. Following on from this, we'll then have the phased rollout of GCSEs and A levels, with phase 1 being ready for first teaching in September 2029 and first assessment in summer 2031, followed by phase 1 A levels for first teaching in September 2031. And you can see the information there regarding phase 2 rollout as well. It's just important to note that the Department for Education haven't given any further updates yet regarding which subjects will be in which phases of the rollout, but we have at least those key dates now to work towards and to aim towards.
Thanks, Vicky. And since the launch of the CAR report last year, we've been busy gathering feedback and insights from the teaching community and currently engaging with the DfE to help ensure the support of good assessment and good teaching and learning. We've also begun our engagement with Ofqual as well on the draft assessment arrangements. And again, there we're reflecting your feedback about what does and doesn't work in the current qualifications so that we can help drive the changes that you would like to see and those which will best benefit teachers and students. In terms of the next steps, as you've heard from Vicky, the timeline for the rollout of the new curriculum will see the final curriculum published in spring 2027 and schools starting to teach it from September 2028. The DfE has recently announced that they'll open the consultation on the new national curriculum programmes of study, together with the consultation on phase 1 GCSEs, this coming September 2026. So we would very much encourage you all to engage with the consultation when it arrives and have your voice heard directly with the Department for Education. It hasn't yet been confirmed, as Vicky said, which subjects will be in phase 1, but we'll likely hear that when those autumn consultations open this coming September.
Thanks, Catherine. And it might be useful at this stage, now we've got those kind of dates in mind, to just reflect on some of the key headlines from that curriculum assessment review. It took place and was published then in November 2025, and we contributed to the review before that publication, drawing on our own observations alongside insights from those of you who attended our focus groups. When the report was published, it was really reassuring to see that lots of what we discussed with teachers was there in the final report too. You may be really familiar with the highlights of this report already, but we just wanted to recap a few of the kind of key topics that emerged from it. So a top kind of key recommendation was the call for clearer purpose and progression with more clarity and specificity at each key stage, including between English and literacy, particularly thinking about key stage 3 and how that provides that kind of coherence between primary and secondary. Also thinking about having clear requirements for drama, speaking and listening, and they were cited alongside a review of grammar teaching as well. Another important element was the oracy framework, and we're supportive of the introduction of a framework for oracy to support practice and to complement the existing frameworks for reading and writing. And we're keen to explore what this looks like in English as a discipline specifically as well. There has been a lot of discussion around the Year 8 test, and we're really interested to explore how this will fit in the assessment framework and what this will look like going forward as well. A very important element that we'd like to really touch upon and explore today is the Key Stage 4 content review. This content really was thinking about the focus on the nature and the expression of language, thinking about opportunities for learners to engage in critical analysis of a wide range of text types and genres, including thinking about the introduction of multimodal and ephemeral text. And so we'll be interested to explore those ideas alongside what GCSE English language might look like as well. And hopefully some of those ideas will come through in today's session. And the final thing to discuss, not only from the report, but hopefully today too, is around literature subject content. So alongside that recommendation to retain Shakespeare, 19th century novel, and a selection of poetry, fiction or drama from the British Isles from 1914 onwards, we're also keen to explore how we can balance literary heritage, diversity and inclusion alongside that without any additional content or exam time. So managing that balance as well. Overall, in summary, we really appreciate the commitment. Sorry, I don't know if I've lost. Oh no, it's still on the screen. Sorry, I thought I'd lost my slide then. We really appreciate the commitment to the clear distinction between GCSE English language and literature, and we're excited to discuss that and to hear your feedback today too. We also are keen to think more about our inclusive literary heritage, retaining the core elements of GCSE English literature, Shakespeare in the 19th century novel, while embracing wider range of texts to better reflect modern Britain as well. We would really welcome further guidance on how the plans to decrease content can be managed, though, thinking about that particularly alongside this commitment to retain the literary heritage whilst including that greater diversity of texts. And we're interested to explore more the scope of introducing multimodal and ephemeral texts, what texts might be included and how these texts might be assessed as well. So hopefully that's provided a useful insight. And in the next part of the session, we're going to move on now to your questions.
Thanks, Vicky. So to get the Q&A started, we've collated some of the most frequently asked questions that you've posed in advance of this session. So we'll run through these first, but we will make time at the end to review the top questions coming up on the Slido and address as many as we can. So please ask your questions at any time and use the facility to upvote them for the ones that interest you most. And this will bring the most popular ones to the top. Given the number of the people on the webinar, there may be some questions that we don't have time to get to, but we will collate them after the session and provide you a response within the next couple of weeks. So to get going, the first question that we come to is around the possibility of changes to GCSE English language to align it more closely with A-level English language progression, which was a key theme in the curriculum and assessment review. And the DFE has confirmed that it aims to design programmes of study that support mastery with careful sequencing within subjects in order to ensure effective pupil progression between and within key stages. So we're reading that really strongly as a signal for the intention to put that clearer progression in from Key Stage 2 all the way through to Key Stage 5. And here at AQA, we really advocate the return of English language GCSE. That includes a body of knowledge reflective of the discipline. So that means that we'll see that progression all the way through. And crucially, it'll offer the bridge from GCSE through to A-level English language study. We have got a Slido question for you on this one.
Absolutely. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this, and the question's on screen, but hopefully it'll be there to prompt you in Slido too. So we'd love to hear, would you like GCSE English language to progress more coherently to A level? Is that something that's important to you as part of the changes that are being made? Hopefully you'll have a chance to vote now. We'd wonder, Lucy, if those, oh, lovely. Thanks, Lucy. Yeah, and it seems from the bits of the poll that I can see there that there seems to be a strong feeling that actually, yes, that would be a priority and would be something that people are interested in, and that reflects. And we're really looking forward to now working with subject experts and the curriculum drafters to develop the definition of that specific knowledge too. Thanks, Lucy. I'm going to just share the next slide.
So, so the next question is around, will fiction in GCSE English language be removed or reduced? So we haven't seen any anything within the CAR to indicate that there won't be the inclusion of fiction in GCSE English language. So while the DfE has committed to refreshing subject programmes of study, there hasn't been any specified parts of what they've said which are about removing fiction from English language. We also have a poll on this one, so it would be good to see what your thoughts are.
Absolutely, yeah. We're interested to see, would you support the removal of fiction in GCSE English language for reading, for writing, across both disciplines? That's really interesting. So coming through from the call here is actually that there wouldn't be a lot of support for removal of fiction in GCSE English language. And a couple of people saying actually yes, or some saying I'm not sure. So that's really useful feedback. Thank you. Um, and it kind of matches some of the conversations, these really mixed conversations we've been having so far. When we've been talking to teachers and leaders, some were happy to lose fiction. They thought actually this might provide a bit more space within that curriculum time to look at relevant language content, thinking about things like having more modern or more multimodal text, for example. However, others, as kind of reflects the feeling perhaps during the webinar poll today, felt that actually it was really important to keep fiction to support students' understanding of narrative construction, to help to preserve creativity and that opportunity within the curriculum as well across a range of text types. So it's really interesting to explore those views, and that our work on that will be ongoing as well. Okay, thanks, Lucy. I'm going to just share again. Okay, so another interesting question that's kind of come through as a bit of a frequently asked question is around the introduction of modular exams and could they be introduced? So it's important to note here that there's a real commitment from the Department for Education to rebalancing assessment and reducing overspecification, including thinking about trying to bring about an overall reduction in exam time. But importantly, it isn't confirmed what this will look like in practice yet. However, even within that context, it's unlikely that modular exams will be reintroduced, and we wouldn't advocate for doing so in English, for a number of reasons really. It could result in even more short-term exam preparation, when teachers have told us actually they want to move away from teaching to the test. It could lead to a fragmentation of the full curriculum into isolated components, restricting students' ability to make those meaningful connections between texts and ideas. And it could lead to a potential reduction in the validity of assessments by overemphasizing exam technique, forcing that emphasis on research strategies instead of assessing the English curriculum more fully. Another question linked to kind of what we've been discussing so far is around the introduction of some new materials as well. So could pre-release materials or an anthology be introduced? And this is something we'd love your feedback on to be thinking about today as well. Because of the level of interest around these two ideas, we will be working with the Department for Education to explore the feasibility of these options. The pre-release materials or an anthology were seen as a way of introducing some set text to GCSE English language, in the same way really that students might experience in GCSE literature or A-level English qualifications. So for example, when we were talking with teachers and focus groups, the A-level Lang Lit anthology was shared as an example. The way it uses multimodal text was referenced as an example of what this might look like.
Okay, and we can see the answers coming up there, which again, it looks like there is really an overwhelming yes, you would support the introduction for an anthology. So it's about 70%, just over 70% saying yes, and around 16, 17 saying no. And actually, that is very consistent with the conversations that we've had, in that we've seen that anthologies and pre-release materials are considered really favourably by teachers and leaders, particularly in the English language area. So, yes, we want to reassure you that we're working with the DFE to explore the feasibility of these options.
Thanks, Catherine. So we're just on to our next question about the spoken language endorsement.
So a question that's come up a lot is whether the spoken language endorsement will be weighted to contribute to the students' grades at reform. And you've also asked questions about whether it's likely to include a conversation, a debate, as well as presentations. Well, we have seen that there is no indication to date that GCSE English spoken language will move from the endorsement to a graded component, or any reference in any of the documentation that we've seen from the DFE toward a new weighting at this stage. And to be perfectly honest with you, we're not expecting to see it happen. However, we would say that we're really pleased to see the commitment to a distinct oracy framework. And what we are advocating for is more clarity around the definitions of spoken language and speaking and listening for English as a subject, and for oracy as it applies to English, and also more broadly across the curriculum.
I'm thinking about we've referenced some of the ideas here around NEA, but the next question is, will coursework return for GCSE English?
Yeah, and here again, we do have quite a definitive answer. So in the DFE's response to the curriculum and assessment review, again, we haven't seen any indication to a return to coursework for English at GCSE. The DFE acknowledges that new technologies, so such as generative AI, carry the risks and the implications for forms of NEA, of which we're all very aware of. They have committed to working closely with Ofqual and the sector to explore alternative assessment methods where necessary. But I think aside from those risks, which around NEA and AI, they've also considered the impact on teacher workload as well of introducing coursework. So given those dual challenges, we believe that GCSE English exams do remain the most effective form of assessment, and that is very likely what we will see going forward.
Thanks, Catherine. Okay, perhaps a little bit of a shift in focus in the questions now, and thinking perhaps towards that literature content that we talked a little bit about earlier in the session when we were looking at those key headlines.
So thank you. So what changes might there be to diversify texts? Well, I guess before we dive into that, I would like to start by saying that obviously we've already committed to increased optionality with the introduction of optional modern texts at A-level and at GCSE, which were introduced in 2023 and 2025. So we do support and obviously believe in embracing a wider range of texts that will better reflect the world that students live in. But obviously we also want to retain those classic works, and we don't want to see an increase to content volume. So there obviously are some careful thinking and balancing that's going to need to happen around that. I do think it's worth noting that despite the recent additions of works by 3 women of colour in our set texts lists in GCSE English literature, most teachers of the specification are still teaching JB Priestley's and Inspector Calls. So although we've put the new texts in, we haven't seen a huge shift in terms of what teachers are teaching. So in 2024, which is a couple of years ago, but the figures won't have changed much in the intervening years, we had over 400,000 candidates who answered questions on an Inspector Calls, and that represents about 83% of the cohort. So I think there is a bit of a conundrum here, and we would hope that you might be able to help us in terms of understanding a bit more about the support that's needed from exam boards and also from the government to enable teachers to choose new texts.
Yeah, so we have our next Slido question here, and I'm aware that this one might take a little bit longer because it's asking what support would help you to reconsider your set text for literature. So while you're completing that and kind of the answers are coming in, and Lucy's going to be able to share those as well, it's just probably worth reflecting on here at this point, the opportunity perhaps presented for GCSE English language here. I'm just thinking about the introduction of multimodal and ephemeral text, perhaps signalling the potential of modernising the text studied as well. That qualification as well and specification might offer even greater potential for greater diversification and representation. And also it's worth remembering at this point that obviously we can teach a range of texts as part of that GCSE English language study. There are no set texts in the specification, so there's real autonomy there for teachers in text selection, hopefully that will be supported by the introduction of the new text types too. Okay, lovely. So it's great to see some answers coming through and then some thumbs up for these. And it seems like actually that resources and funding seem to be a key priority in terms of those support areas. We also have time, schemes of work. Yeah, really interesting. But it seems to be that the kind of balance between time, resources, workload is really important as well. Thank you. We've got some longer answers coming through here as well.
Yeah, we'll spend some time having a look at that. I think there's some really interesting opinions. And also, I've seen a couple coming up saying, we keep Inspector Calls. We love it. It's, it gives us a diversity of different things to teach, and the students like it as well. So I think it's all about that balance, isn't it? So yeah, thank you so much for providing all those thoughts.
Lovely. Okay, so thinking about literature still, we just might want to address about changes to poetry.
Yeah, thank you, Vicky. So you've asked about potential changes to poetry, and when we've been out and about speaking to teachers and leaders of English, we have heard from quite a few that the poetry anthology could be a place where cuts could be made for content. So quite a few people we've heard say that 15 poems in the anthology is too many, and suggesting that this could be one place that we could cut some content. So we don't have any indication yet in the consultation process that this will be the case. But we can see that having fewer poems in the anthology would give more teaching time for more in-depth study. So I would say this is one to watch.
Thanks, Catherine. And we've just got a few additional questions at the end before we get ready to go back to your slide in kind of 2 minutes time when we look at some of the questions that you've raised today. A final one to consider might be around what media literacy will look like in English. So the Department for Education has stated that the reformed English programmes of study will expose students to the study of a wide range of texts, supporting them to analyse and challenge arguments, building media literacy. So we're keen to advocate for critical analysis of multimodal and transient text, thinking about that English language disciplinary lens as well. And it's important to note that the Department for Education has committed to teach our young people to think critically and act thoughtfully, armed with digital, financial and media literacy that they need to thrive in the modern world. And this has been framed as something that's cross-curricular rather than allocating it solely to English. So part of our work at the moment is working with the Department for Education to understand how media, digital and financial literacy can be embedded in a subject appropriate way as well. And a final question for today, just to address is that's come up a couple of times, is regarding will foundation tier papers for English return? And it's just important probably to note that the Department for Education hasn't indicated the reintroduction of tiered English GCSE papers, and we wouldn't be supportive of this approach. With regards to any indication of an academic versus a functional split at GCSE, functional skills does already exist, and there's no proposal to include more functional literacy in the GCSE English qualifications. Nice to mention, though, perhaps at this opportunity, that there is a proposal to introduce a new level 1 English and Maths stepping stone qualification for recent GCSE students, and a streamlined suite of level 3 A level, T levels, and V levels, offering different pathways for progression. And that's certainly something that we're interested in exploring and learning more about as it goes into development as well. Okay, so I think this might be a nice point for us now to really have an opportunity. We've looked at our pre-submitted questions, but it might be nice to start to look at some that have been submitted by you during today's session as well.
Lovely. Lucy, are you able to bring up some of the Slido questions that have been voted to the top? Brilliant, thank you. So the top question is around the spoken language endorsement and whether it will be worth the percentage of the whole grade. So we did cover that one early on, and there is no indication that the spoken language endorsement will contribute to final grade. So it looks very much like, it's still to be confirmed, but it looks very much to us as though it will continue as an endorsement rather than a component that contributes to the final grade.
Yeah, absolutely. And the second question, is it likely we could move to an open book assessment to make assessments more inclusive? This again has been something that's been discussed at teacher panels and in focus groups, and very much like where we were getting your feedback earlier on regards to assessments, it's something that's been discussed but with mixed kind of feedback. We don't have any indication of movement to an open book assessment, but it's something certainly that we can look to explore and provide more information on if needed as part of the FAQs as well.
The next question is, can we be assured that paper 2 question 5 topic is accessible to students from a lower socioeconomic background? If they don't experience, for example, adventure holidays, the countryside, they may not be aware of fast fashion or well versed in AI. So yeah, one of the things that we're very much looking at the moment is the design of our assessments, and that is both around minimizing unnecessary text and also linguistic complexity in our assignments as we write them, as well as looking at different contexts, because obviously we understand that certain students will be familiar with certain contexts and not others. And it's really interesting, actually, the feedback that we've had on the technology question that was in the paper that students have just sat. We had some really positive feedback on that one because it was around a context that all the learners could understand and they could all kind of be engaged and excited about. Now, obviously, we can't always have a question about mobile phones and technology in that way, but it is something which forms a part of the compulsory training that all of our assessment writers go through, and we have got the development at the moment of a set of universal design rules which will help have that those design fundamentals across all of our assessment writing teams. So yeah, great question, thank you.
Yeah, brilliant. So the next question is, will English language become more linguistic in its focus? And I'm perhaps imagining this relates to thinking about the subject content and the kind of clear focus on, for example, GCSE English language. And I think part of the work that's going on at the moment, and we'll be interested to learn more from, is part of the national curriculum and the subject content that's determined for Key Stage 4, and thinking about that clear distinction that the Department for Education might create as part of have that review of the curriculum, and once we have that subject content through, we'll have a better understanding of what that might look like. But certainly we know that a focus is on creating that clear progression and a greater coherence as we move from GCSE English language to A level. And I know that's something, thinking about that poll earlier, that people who've joined us today demonstrated that they were supportive of as well. So yeah, we look forward to seeing much more about that once this the content is published as well.
And the next question is, please define ephemeral text. I can't read the rest of that question, but well, that is something that we are working with the Department for Education on, because actually we also need that better definition of ephemeral text as well. So obviously there are lots of ways that we could define it, but there is a body of work going on at the moment to look at, you know, what do we mean by multimodal, what do we mean by ephemeral, so that we can start to introduce those definitions and ideas, and you can start to kind of introduce them into your work and thinking at the same time. So there is a bit of work still to do on that one.
Thanks, Catherine. And Lucy, the one where it says, will English language become more linguistic in its focus? That was the one that we just covered a moment ago, thinking about that progression as well. I think one must have moved up in the meantime. Could coursework or controlled assessment be reintroduced? So something that we covered sort of earlier in the session, and just to be clear, it's for a number of reasons that there's no indication at the moment that for our subject that coursework or controlled assessment would be reintroduced. I don't know, Catherine, if you want to just talk a little bit more about some of the kind of the reasons and the rationale behind that.
I think the main two reasons that were talked about in the curriculum assessment report are teacher workload. Obviously, coursework involves a greater amount of work and time, and therefore kind of pressure on teachers. And the other one is AI, and the fact that you know, we're looking at and working with Ofqual across a whole suite of our qualifications, looking at NEA and making sure that it's fit for purpose. So it's not, given those two things, it's not something at the moment which is likely to be introduced at GCSE, although we do obviously understand the value and want to retain the progression that it provides onto university for NEA within our A levels. The next question is, how will A-level English literature, will we see a decrease in the amount of poems taught? 15 seems excessive. So yes, to that one, that is something that we are actively looking at. And we can see that is an area where there is some scope to reduce content and allow more in-depth teaching.
So this is an interesting question. I think this is linked to one where it was partially cut off before. So it says, how will ephemeral text now stand with the new government guidance of social media bans being enforced? And I think this is one of those questions where we will certainly come back and address it through our frequently the FAQ document that we produce after this session. The reasons for that are twofold. As we said, for the first part, we want to understand a lot more about what the introduction of those into ephemeral text will look like, what form it will take, what the definition of that will be. And so that could be part of kind of understanding our response to this as well. And also that wider policy ongoing debate is something that we will be interested in and want to contribute to as well, and understand more about in terms of yes, your point around the social media ban for young people, and then this use of kind of introduction of ephemeral text and the media literacy and how all those things interplay with each other. So not, unfortunately, probably something we can give a definitive answer on today, but certainly a question that's going to be of interest and something we can look to include as our response to today's session as well.
Thank you. And the next question is, do we think any plans are in place to reduce the amount of content that relies on memory in literature exams? That's a really interesting question, and is linked to the question that the topic that we talked about earlier around related to anthologies, but around open book taking an approach to have open book, which is something that we are actively looking into. I think it's also worth remembering that we don't at AQA encourage the memorising of really lengthy quotes within GCSE English literature, and really talk about the fact that it's very important that the story is understood, and there might be some short quotes that are employed in the answering of the questions, but that students won't necessarily be rewarded for regurgitating really long quotes if they're not relevant to the question in hand. So yes, that is a good question and something which is being looked at.
Okay, I think we've got time for one more question. We haven't had the top of the question here says, will unseen poetry be removed from literature? It says skills are more language based and it appears to serve little purpose other than to push the most able. So this is another example where we'll be kind of watching, and there's been no indication that from us yet to see kind of where the direction will be on this, and we'll be waiting attentively and using all of the feedback from different voices and all of the focus groups that we kind of engage with in our teacher panels to take that feedback to the Department for Education regarding unseen poetry, and to also be thinking about assessment or the assessment design as well, and where the unseen elements are included, and obviously those conditions will be set for us too, and we can think about that as well. And again, it's a great question that we will make sure is included alongside. I can see there's a number underneath that we're not going to get to address today due to timing, but all of the questions that have been posed today will be responded to. The FAQ document will be something that will take a little while to compile, so we're not able to say that we'll be able to provide it. It'll be within the coming weeks, and that will be made available. It's worth mentioning that we have our assessment reform hub page, and this is like a one-stop shop for all of the latest updates on assessment reform, and that's where that document will live, and there's a copy of it there at the moment, and it will be updated kind of over time as well. Okay, we've talked a lot about teacher panels today, and just before we finish, I really would like to ask for your support. I'll come back to that other one in a minute. I won't forget the other poll that I've got to do. So here, the teacher panels are your way of sharing your feedback, your thoughts, your experience of teaching English and our qualifications in schools, and we would love for you to take part and to share that feedback and expertise with us as well. We try to use teachers' voices and students' experiences to inform all of the products that we create here at AQA, and your support with that would be really welcome. So there is a link on screen, and the slides will be available after the session, but there's also a QR code which I'll leave on for a moment now so you can access that. We do have one more Slido poll for today, because again we would love your feedback. So could we just do a very quick poll based on today's session? How much do you kind of feel that you understand about what assessment reform could mean for you? And so hopefully you'll be able to indicate on that poll how you're feeling now, and that will help us to inform future sessions and plan those future sessions for you too. Okay, and while that's loading up, I'd just like to say a huge thank you for joining us today, and for taking part in the event. Your feedback was really, really useful, and the questions have really given us some useful insight into kind of further information that we can provide to support you too. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.